What are some things you need to do to make sure your website's ready for AEO and GEO? That's what we'll be talking about on this episode of the Store Connect podcast. My name is Andy Johns, your host, and I'm joined on this episode by Jordan Brannon, who leads our Pioneer Web team. So, Jordan, thanks so much for hopping on.
I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic that we certainly are having daily conversations about, and it involves some of my favorite things: technology, AI, conspiracy theories, and also how we really maximize the utility of your website for you.
Well, I hear podcasts that talk about conspiracy theories do well, so maybe maybe this one will get some extra traffic for using those terms.
Top 10 of the iTunes list. Here we come.
We'll go for it. Well, thanks again for taking the time. This has been something ever since Google's event a few weeks ago, earlier this summer. This has been something that's really on my mind when we're getting into AEO and GEO. We probably need to define that here in a minute, but my kind of bold prediction here is that we're not far, maybe a year or two from now, that quaint little Google homepage with the 10 blue links of the top thing is going to feel like a cassette tape. I mean, we're blowing way past that, and if folks aren't ready, they're going to be in a world of hurt in terms of relying on web traffic. So let's go ahead and define it first. So when we're talking about AEO and GEO, that's answer engine optimization and generative engine optimization. Go ahead and help us understand. I use those kind of interchangeably. Is that kind of the way that we're using them at this point?
Yeah, I really have never seen anybody make a strong case for either of those terms being distinct from the other. Frankly,
Okay.
my personal opinion was that they really originated out of SEO software businesses trying to find a new product to sell. And then some SEOs who were like, hey, this is sort of buzzy and we can jump on the same train. So we use the terms AEO, GEO, AI SEO pretty interchangeably, and I won't fault you for choosing one or the other.
Okay, got it. But whatever letters we use, we're basically talking about where folks are either using that summary that Google puts at the top, the overview, or where they're using their AI platform of choice, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever it is, and they're asking questions and getting answers that may be taking information from your site or from your from your online properties, but they're not actually sending people to your site anymore, like the way Google has worked for 20 plus years.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we originally had tried to coin the term prompt response optimization. And really it was about how do you position your product, your service, your brand well inside of an AI generated summary and response.
And why does this matter? Why is this something that folks need to be aware of? If somebody's out there and they're responsible for the website for their broadband provider or for their electric utility, what does this mean for them? I think we've all used the little summaries at the top, and they can be handy sometimes, and they can be way off base sometimes. But flip it around from the utility side or the broadband side. What does this mean for those folks?
I think the real thing that we have to understand from a utility and broadband perspective is that this is really a mandated change that's coming to how people access the web. And we all are familiar with the reality that the web is one of the primary means of communication and accessing information, whether that's about your existing service provider, whether it's about your existing products, or about new service providers and new products that you're looking at purchasing. And so really, there isn't sort of a future where we see big tech backing away from AI, and they have a ton of financial incentives from investors to keep pushing AI forward. And so we're going to inherit that as broadbands and as utilities and those who are trying to really maximize positive exposure for the same inside of the web. So again, I think if you've traditionally relied on the web for communication or for discovery, you really have to see AI as being the thing that replaces the web as we know it.
I've heard the term Google Zero thrown out there as where people getting ready for what happens when you get zero traffic from Google. That radically changes things for a lot of businesses. I think you've used the term the webless web. I mean, we're really talking about some pretty seismic shifts. I know just looking at the web traffic on our own sites, Pioneer and ESG, the sites that we run, we've seen just since these Google overviews started about 2 years ago, it's dropped. The percentage of our traffic that comes from Google has gone from in the 60s to in the 40s in terms of percentage of incoming traffic. So we're seeing it, and I know it's something folks need to start getting ready for.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely you're going to see easy informational responses completely absorbed by these AI overviews with Google or by a prompt response in ChatGPT. Ultimately, though, we do see a future where a lot of transactional type of interactions that we think need to happen on your website today may actually be able to shift into Google. Google's been promoting this thing called UCP, which is Universal Commerce Protocol. And it's aimed at e-commerce today, and it's the ability for Google to basically consume your entire e-commerce flow, all the way to
Wow.
checkout and taxes and shipping and all of those promotions that you might offer, and pull them all into a Google search or a Google AI experience. We see that potentially happening with service providers. We see some of different businesses like restaurants and even utility providers who are starting to get phone calls from these AIs from Google. Google has an AI agent that will make a phone call for you from a search result when it feels like it has a good way of handling that.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in that and come back, because that synthetic consumer or agentic shopper is a pretty interesting concept. Folks need to get ready for. But let's start on the right now. If folks are already seeing a dip in traffic, if you know, especially if you're a broadband provider and you rely on that steady amount of traffic coming in for people looking to sign up for service, what are some things folks need to do right now with their sites, and what are some things they need to be aware of in terms of making sure that they show up in some of those results and those overviews?
Yeah, it's such a big question. We've found some answers to this that we're really confident in now. The one thing that I'll kind of caveat all of these with is that really LLM search is very much an emerging practice.
Sure.
Google obviously has a very mature search engine that they've monetized very well. And so they're going to move more slowly and stably, but ChatGPT loses tons of money on search right now, and it's losing tons of money in other ways. And so don't expect to see a real mature and fixed sort of North Star strategy for ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude in search specifically for a while yet, until they figure out how to connect that to monetization. But strategically, what we're seeing specifically for LLMs, as they are looking for a easier to consume, less expensive form of content to consume than what you might have seen with Google. We're also seeing that they really are emphasizing content that has been published recently. And they also seem to have some preference for certain types of content coming from certain sources. And so if you're thinking about your marketing or SEO strategy, you start to have to think about how do we address these things in different ways in different places than we would have with our traditional Google focus in that 10 blue link era.
So it sounds like some of the same foundations as SEO or even basic communication. You know, when we talk about, well, LLMs are going to go out and they're looking for the easy information and what can they find out easiest, and if you make it hard for them to find, they're going to bounce. It's like, well, you know, that sounds a little bit like humans.
Yeah. Yep.
But how do you see some of the parallels between the SEO, which I know you've been in for a long time, just good old, you know, regular human communication, and some of these new AEO and GEO options?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I'm always arguing against is the idea that GEO or AEO are really their own practice, because, like you said, they're really inheriting a long legacy of marketing strategy and marketing communications that has worked ever since the newspaper. And so
Right.
I think it really is a matter of convenience, and it is a matter of being able to be rightly positioned as a utility or as a broadband provider. So when we're talking about that particular sort of the distinctives, these AIs are largely operating much like Google has for 10 years. And so they are facing a couple of significant challenges. One is, how do I find content quickly? And two, how do I associate content, the right content, to a particular prompt in a timely fashion? And so if you can start to address those things as part of your marketing strategy, you'll be successful. And that, of course, just introduces some nuance to your technical strategy and to your communication strategy and to your press strategy if you're going that avenue.
Yeah, one of the specific things, and if you're not listening to Buffering, which is the Calyx podcast, Gabe and the Calyx crew do a great job over there on that podcast. One of the things they mentioned specifically for broadband providers is the idea that, you know, for years, some folks have set up their websites where if you want to get any information about what speeds or prices are available, you've got to start with an address, and we're not going to give you any information until you put that address in. How does one of the concerns that they brought up over on buffering was that just like a human, sometimes the agent or the LLM is going to look at that and say, too difficult, I'm going to Comcast because they've got theirs published or whatever.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to have a distinction here between agentic browsers and that search and retrieval function that we see happening more commonly inside of an LLM.
Oh, good. Yeah, let's get into that.
So an agent, when we talk about an agent, it really does mean the AI is now trying to act in some humanistic way and navigating your website and inputting information like maybe your address for you, your name for you, and maybe even putting in a credit card and in some cases agreeing to terms and conditions, which is a whole nother legal discussion to attach to.
Yeah, right.
So that's agentic experience. And when you actually have a human user who is giving an AI agentic type instructions, you'll be able to get that agent to go further down the pathway unless you have other technical barriers in your form entries and things like that, which might keep that AI from actually completing a task. But that's really not a very big cross-section of the market today. It's minuscule, in fact. Yeah. Right. And it will definitely change. I think as we all get more comfortable with AIs operating on our behalf, we'll probably lean on them more for some of these tasks. But today, even in the minuscule percent of search traffic that comes from LLMs, this is another minuscule percentage because it does require a paid premium plan with your favorite LLM to be able to get them to do agentic activities. But search and retrieval is happening a lot. And like I said earlier, these AIs don't have the budget to go through any sort of actual testing or data input process. They just want to go to your website, find text content that's easily accessible, that answers the particular prompt, and then retrieves it back for their prompt response. There is a danger that happens when you've gated that content in some ways. And strategically, maybe it made sense when you relied more on human visitors. But AIs aren't going to be satisfied with saying, I couldn't find this information. I've never seen ChatGPT do that for me. And I'm sure you probably haven't either. And so what they do is they go out and they either make up that information through hallucination, or they source it from a third-party site, which could include negative commentary on Reddit or your Google business profile. Someone out there could have been dissatisfied with your pricing or your product offering, decided to post that in some random forum. And because you didn't make that information available through your own branded website or content channel, all of a sudden that's coming back to bite you in the rear.
Yeah, that we know it's going to pull it from somewhere because it doesn't want to not get an answer.
Yep.
That gets us kind of towards the webless web concept that you were talking about. Unpack that term for us a little bit. What do you mean when you say webless web?
Yeah, I think when I grew up, the web was this place of, it's a little bit of a hippie commune. Everybody had a chance to share their thoughts and their ideas, and everybody had equal access to the search user. It felt really like this venue where new things could be discovered all the time. And frankly, I think that idea of the open web has really been maintained for the last 20 years or so. What we're seeing as a result of AIs being pushed forward by big tech, especially into hardware devices, is that the need for a human to visit all of these different forums to retrieve information or interact with businesses or purchase things or hire someone for particular services, that's going away. And AIs increasingly are sort of showing their cards and saying, we expect to be operating as an operating system and as an app and as a website where all of the content that you would have normally presented directly to your consumer, we've now consumed, and we now act as the intermediary to. And so the webless web really says you go to one website or one app when you turn on your phone or your computer, and you spend most of your time navigating and interacting specifically with that AI of choice. And the actual websites and things that are behind them really kind of disappear. And so we have this webless web.
When I've read up and looked into some of the ways to combat that scenario, some of the things that you see, yes, there are ways to optimize your site to be able to improve leaps and bounds there too. Another major way that folks are looking to combat that sort of thing is just good old fashioned outreach. When you read the experts, they say, well, email newsletters, a strong social media presence, print mailers, print newsletters, those type of things that have been around forever. But the idea that they're not coming to your site anymore, you have to go talk to them. If the AI is being the intermediary, like you said, going around the robots to get to the people that are the different channels
Yeah.
is seeming increasingly more important.
Yeah, you have to find a way to build that human connection and maintain it. And I think that's really critical for businesses to think about their website, not so much as just an acquisition strategy, but as a relationship retention strategy. The more value you build in your website, the more likely you are to continue to see that website shared and surfaced by your existing consumers or prospective consumers, and even by their AIs. There's a really interesting tidbit that came out of some work that we saw in the SEO space that showed that Google's personal intelligence was actually more frequently surfacing brands that showed up in your Gmail inbox. And so if you're a Gmail user and you're on an Android phone and using personal intelligence, the companies that were regularly emailing you were more likely to show up in an AI response in a search type of behavior. So all of a sudden we're seeing, again, personalization, company communication beginning to get mashed into this single AI experience.
That's fascinating. I hadn't heard that before. I know that we're getting to a point quickly where using things like that, asking typing in the best internet service for me, that people could get very different answers based on the habits, because your AI knows knows what you're doing, and it knows what I'm doing, and it may give us different answers. So it's fascinating when we're getting into that kind of.
It's funny, we get this a lot when we're talking to utilities and broadbands. They're like, ChatGPT likes me, and we're like, well, ChatGPT also knows you work for that particular utility or broadband. And so it's going to kind of measure its criticism in a way that's different from somebody who doesn't. And people also have to keep in mind that there very much is a paid tiering that's occurring. If you're using a free unlogged in ChatGPT session versus a paid ChatGPT user, your search results are going to be different. And the effort that ChatGPT goes to in providing those responses is also going to be different.
Interesting. I don't know that I realized that part. So if we've got somebody who's hearing this and they're thinking through, okay, this is going to change everything. I'm a little shook right now from everything they're saying. Obviously, getting a brand new website from Pioneer Web would be a great thing for them to do. But as an intermediary step, or what are some things, if they don't have in the budget right now for a brand new website, you can work on that for next year's budget. But what are some things that they could do right away to kind of at least tilt some of the odds in their favor?
And I will quickly call out too, I appreciate the mention of the new website, but one of the beauties of Pioneer Web is we actually are capable of working on a lot of different platforms. And so we can help with these intermediary steps. We're probably best known for our work in WordPress, but certainly happy to support websites on other platforms, whether it's Drupal or Joomla or Squarespace or something else altogether.
Excellent point. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Yeah, important one, because it is a real miss, I think, for a lot of utilities where they feel like they're kind of stuck with one provider because they're on one particular CMS. Right. When we're looking at how to optimize a website today for AEO or GEO, again, come back to that principle first, that AIs are operating on a strict budget. And so if you make them navigate to find something, and if something isn't available in text because it's in a great video or a wonderful photo or an infographic, there's a good chance that they're not actually going to bother finding it at all. And so websites that are highly interactive, have a lot of different dynamic experiences like forms, you have to be really careful in your expectations for AI, because they're just going to look for plain text, prominently placed in the code, and really offered in a way that's a bit more bulleted and succinct than what you might normally use to communicate to a customer. So be direct in your language. Make sure you're optimizing key landing pages that talk about your company, talk about your utility or your broadband provider, that talk about your product and your service. Make sure those are really clear and you're not sort of couching things in sort of a communication-esque type of language. The other piece is start to consider how often you're updating that content. Again, for true LLMs, we're seeing a lot of bias towards content that was recently updated. And there is a communication mechanism to the LLM that's happened, whether that's the title of the page says updated 2026, or that's something that's communicated through schema on the page. Those are really helpful in ensuring that you have some success. And then finally, again, I think just starting to strategically think about how you can distribute your content to other locations on the web. A lot of our utilities that we've worked with and a lot of broadband providers that we've worked with, they're very focused on their own website and they want people at the website, and they sort of shrug at Reddit and they shrug at some of these other third-party sites that are out there. Today, those places are going to govern the conversation around your brand. And if you allow that to happen, you're really going to be in hot water.
some seismic shifts for sure in
Hmm.
terms of how it's going. We've talked about some pretty weird stuff, but we've saved probably the weirdest for last. Let's talk about synthetic consumers and agentic shoppers. So we're getting to the point where, once folks get their website ready, obviously that's a huge step, getting that optimized. But they've also got to have customer service folks ready that they may be called by
Hmm.
by a robot, by an agent, an AI the term synthetic consumer is the one that really stuck in my mind. But
Yep.
yeah, what are we there yet? Or is that something kind of coming down the way in the future?
It's already happening, again, primarily in certain industries. Google's really promoting this sort of synthetic shopper consumer for restaurants today. And it started to push that out towards professional services providers who have opted into some of their local service offerings. So you could be a plumber or a contractor who gets a call from Google's robot and says, "Hey, I'm calling. I'm looking for information on this particular service. How much do you cost? When can you be here?" And that's a very odd experience. And again, I think because of the ease and the convenience that it offers, and I think as people become more comfortable with relying on AIs for that sort of activity, we expect to see even common, things that like broadband and utility inquiries happening through robots. There's a few things that really have to be thinking about as a utility provider. When a customer service person receives a call from an agent, an AI agent, there's an instant reaction.
FBI agent. I mean, that's a whole
Different,
different conversation.
different
So
thing. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yep.
AI agent. Yeah, when they get a
Yep.
call from that.
Yep.
Glad you
They have.
specified.
We all get a little creeped out. We talk about the uncanny valley in AI experiences or robotics where something's not quite human enough. And some of these voices on your phone sound almost legitimate, but there's something weird about it. And so your customer service team has to actually be able to, one, overcome the initial concern that this is a fraud type of activity. And two, they also have to get to the point of being able to establish the veracity of the call and who they're calling on behalf. And so you have to have a process for that. So, normally when someone calls in, I'm talking to a person, I'm asking for these specific security questions.
Right.
How do I respond to them if a robot has the answer to those questions? Is it a cause for security or not? And again, I think just simply hanging up the phone is not going to be an option. We've seen Google, again, in some of these other industries, start to be biased towards businesses that don't just hang up. They actually look for success metrics based on those calls. And a restaurant that's more responsive to the robot is one that's going to get more phone calls. So broadbands have to start thinking about that. So security is the first one. Have some actual coaching and processing. How do we actually identify who this is, who they're calling on behalf? Is this legitimate or not? And then again, I think maybe it's the Terminator watcher in me. Maybe be a little bit polite to them. A lot of these calls are being recorded, sure. And they might be relayed verbatim or in a recording to the actual consumer. So how you treat their bot might actually be what's conveyed to them. And then again, knowing when to cut off the conversation if you feel like it crosses into something that's unnecessarily intrusive or potentially creates a personal security risk for an individual consumer.
Yeah, that seems like the proprietary information and all that personal identifiable. I mean, there's so many questions there, but I can see a world very soon, if it's not happening already, where on the sales retention side of things, where normally when somebody calls in and says, "Hey, I'm ready to cancel my service, I just signed up with a national competitor," you get that opportunity to say, "Oh, well, let me match their price," or have you thought about this? If it's a robot calling you, if it's one of those agentic shoppers calling a cutoff service, I would imagine you're not getting that opportunity. So that's a whole other reason to stay in touch with folks and kind of keep in tune with how they're feeling.
Yeah, there'll have to be some kind of line of inquiry, I think, to discover which AI is calling and who they're calling on behalf. A lot of these agents that are doing something on behalf of a human, they often are checking with the human to sort of validate and confirm. And that type of interaction might allow you to have some sort of pitch. You also face the risk, though, of some of this could be used for competitive discovery. What we know about Google is anytime they get access to information is they're going to turn it around into a product or an ad somehow. And so if your customer service team is disclosing to Google unique custom pricing available to one customer who threatened to cancel, and Google's now turning that into part of an AI overview that's published for everybody, we have a whole different issue to deal with.
That's true. Yeah.
Yep.
Google publishes, when you ask how much is internet, they say it's this much. But if you call and threaten to cancel, it's $20 cheaper. Then, yeah, wow, that's interesting to think
Yep.
about.
Yeah, the final one is just accessibility. That's a big issue and something we've done a lot of work to remediate for utilities and broadbands that are coming onto Pioneer Web. We're inheriting a website that's not ADA compliant. A lot of people are talking about these agents as being a future where it gives access to individuals with different abilities and disabilities, access to the economy and the industries around them in a way that they haven't had before. And so you also have to be mindful of the fact that this could be part of an accessibility policy, and there may be some legal compliance things you have to be able to do if that's the case.
It does seem like some overlap for sure. So last thing for you here, as we're wrapping up, usually the way that we end these is just asking for some advice. If there's somebody listening, like we said, and they're they're worried about these things, maybe they're seeing some of it already. What are some of the things? Obviously, knowledge is power. Kind of staying on top of what's going on because it changes so fast. What's a piece or two of advice that you would give people who feel like they're standing on the edge of something really big right now?
Yeah. First is I wouldn't take your eye off of Google. I really emphasize a lot when I'm talking to a worried utility or broadband, especially those that are really trying to grow their market share. And they've been relying on SEO to do that. We really say hey, keep your eye on Google. Google still owns a massive majority of search market share. We see Google's AI products continuing to increment into ChatGPT. Just this past month, ChatGPT's published numbers dropped below 50% of sort of LM market share. They're at about 46% now. So that was 65, 70% 2 years ago. Yeah. And they're on a very fast decline. Gemini is eating a lot of that, which is a Google product. And it's one that Google's tying into its search experience. So keep your focus on Google and how well you're doing in Google. That's likely to control how well you do in this AI future as well. So that's starting point one. And then I think two is really think about LLMs as part of a reputation and brand management story first, before you start to think about them as an acquisition channel. Again, most users for ChatGPT tend to be younger. They tend to be more technologically enabled. And so there tends to be an audience that skews that way. And a lot of them are still going to Google or to your website to complete that transaction at the end. And what they're really looking for at the top of funnel is this sort of brand reputation story. And if you're not really thinking about how your story is being told away from your website, chances are that you're going to have a poor showing inside of ChatGPT or Claude when someone's inquiring about the best broadband utility provider near them. Again, they may be going to some place like Reddit, or someplace where you maybe have less than favorable reviews. And that can be a real risk. And so I think those are probably the two things I'd really be watching for today.
You mentioned Reddit a couple of times. That's one of the things from reading. It seems like Reddit may have right now a kind of an outsized contribution to some of these models. Is it being prioritized in some ways?
Yeah, it's interesting. Reddit is a unique sort of property in all of these AI conversations. I think AI companies love it because there's a lot of conversationally human interactions. In some ways, people self-police the platform in a way that maybe they can't get human intervention elsewhere. Like you think about all the companies that are now using AI to write copy for their websites, instead of allowing a human writer to do that. Reddit is really a place where a lot of people quickly downvoting, marking, flagging either a user or comment as spam that's coming from AI. And so it actually creates this really unique place where these companies these AI companies can use that as hey, this is actually a human voice. And again, it goes back to some of the strategy we talked about. Reddit is mostly text. It's mostly sort of succinct, short form, very direct type of statements. And that really plays into AI content discovering what they like.
Perfect. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for joining me. I think that was very insightful for me. I think folks will really appreciate learning about that. And it's the kind of thing where we can't sit on this podcast too long. We got to publish it quick because it's going to change. So,
absolutely, yeah. Tomorrow is going to be a whole different day.
He is Jordan Brannon. He leads our Pioneer Web team here at Pioneer. I'm your host, Andy Johns. And until we talk again, keep telling your story.
Story Connect is a production of Pioneer Utility Resources. Send questions to hello@pioneer.coop. And learn more about our member-owned marketing agency at pioneer.coop.